Welcome to CxXchange Success Hour. We're so excited to have you here today. This session is CSM call coaching and scoring using AI agents, co-led by Anthony DeShazor. I'm going to get that right one of these days. All right, let me go ahead and stop sharing for a second. Anthony DeShazor. I finally got it right.
You got it.
Please introduce yourself real quick. I'm excited. Anthony and I, we met through LinkedIn. We're in a couple of different communities together. We started commenting on each other's posts, and it's through a comment on one of his posts that we have him here today sharing this fun stuff. So, there's lots of fun that you can have out on LinkedIn, right?
Lots of fun.
Yes.
So I'm Anthony DeShazor. I've been in CS and customer revenue for over 25 years. Started out as a software developer. I joke with people, I learned how to write Java and multi-dimensional queries before I learned how to do SQL. So I'm that type of techie guy that's very heavy on data. But I've been three-time CCO. I currently am launching my own thing. So most of the time I'm just learning and contributing back to the community right now while I'm working with customers on the side. So this is my fun stuff, the building new things and trying new things.
Awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and dig in here. And let's first talk about then, why you might do call scoring and by extension of that, call coaching. And Anthony, I know you can speak to this some, but just from my own experience, there is so much gold in the now that we have AI capturing our calls, right? And so when you think about that, or even before, if we just had like the recordings before we could really start to analyze something from it, I mean, there was so much there, but frankly, because it was just sitting there as a recording, you couldn't really use it, right? Because it takes as much time to watch a call as it was for the call to happen in the first place. And so you don't have, especially if you're a leader, you don't have, 8 hours of the day times all of your team members.
Jen, I think you went on mute.
Oh, that's funny. Okay,
Yeah.
I just unmuted. But anyway, so why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts and how you came up with this?
So I've lived this just as Jen and everyone else. You just don't have enough time in a day to review every call, but there's tons of gold in those calls. You leave it up to your CSMs or your frontline managers to try to extract everything you can out of the call, but in reality, there's just not enough time. Vonage did a survey, I think it was 2024, that found that 95% of calls don't get analyzed. They're not reviewed. They're just out there. And these are customer calls where your customers are pouring their heart out to you, letting you know, hey, this is what's working, here's what's not working. But we don't have the bandwidth typically to actually review all of them. And so now we're in a new world. With AI, we now have the ability to examine every single call. Not we individually, but the technology is there and the facilities are there now where we can analyze every single call, extract all the revenue signals out of it, the expansion signals, in whatever call coaching we may need to implement to help our customers or our CSMs be better. We can do that now at scale relatively inexpensively. And so it's just a little setup time up front to train and build the system. But after that, it runs by itself.
Well, and to me, what was exciting about this too is I know as a leader, I never had time to do all of the coaching because, oftentimes if you're joining a call, then you end up participating in it as opposed to really being able to coach from it, right? And then otherwise you'd have to sit there and watch a call, and then it's sort of like after the fact, and hindsight's always 2020, right? And so having a way where the CSM can actually engage in their own call coaching, essentially by having an agent that they can then, hear back from. I thought that was really nice. And so often we see this for SDRs or for
Hmm.
salespeople, but we don't really see this for CSMs. And yet we are the key to most of the company revenue because anywhere from 70 to 95%
Yeah.
of the company revenue is customer revenue. So it really is critical that CSMs especially understand how they can participate, whether it's through discovery questions or other types of things to help uncover. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. Now, wanted to be sure too that we just for level setting, talk about what the difference is between an agent versus if you're chatting with an LLM or, chat GPT. And so we wanted to add this slide in. And basically the difference is if it's going to be automated, whether it works off of a trigger or if it is something that is on a certain time of the day or day of the week, day of the month, something like that, that's an agent. If it can run without you being at your desk, at your keyboard, that's an agent. If you have to interact with it, whether by voice or typing, then that is where you're actually interacting with the LLM. So just want to pause for 1 second just to make certain that if there's any questions on that, because we are going to be, what Anthony has come up with is really cool. He first built it over in a chat GPT,
Hmm.
in a custom GPT, and then he pulled it into work in an agent. So we're going to be going through that. So understanding that distinction, that difference is important. Any thoughts or questions before we move on? You good? You don't have to be that fast. You can ask the question even if I've moved on. Okay? All right. So let's dig in.
So the first option, as Jen talked about, that I did this with a prospect of mine that became a customer. They came to me and say, "Listen, we need to get something moving fast. We heard that this AI thing could help, but we don't want to invest a lot until we can see some proof." So I said, "Well, great. Let's write a fixed price contract, and I'll build you a custom GPT." That will help you analyze your calls. So this was something I did in relatively short time, in less than a week for them, just something quick turnaround. And it was to start with a custom GPT. What does it mean? Let's just start with being able to get the GPT or chat GPT to think like a CSM leader. Get it to start thinking a lot, analyzing like I would or like they would as to what the call does, whether or not the CSM conducted the call properly. But what I also did with the customer, I put out a roadmap of, hey, we can start with the custom GPT. But once we get that working, you'll want to automate that. So that became version 2. Then beyond that, I said we can then provide even more data to the agent so we can have more context to the call. And then we can add even more agents in the workflow to even extract customer intelligence from the call. So I laid out this workflow. So far, they've gone the first 2 steps with me, and we'll see if they come back and we can do the other 2 steps. But I definitely suggest you take this in an agile framework. Start by just getting a custom GPT or get a gem that just really understands your calls and just
And
start there.
let me just interrupt. For anybody who's not familiar with Agile framework, that means like try something out, see how it works, modify it, improve it, try it out again, see how it works. It's iteration. So
Yeah,
the Agile framework is like if you're trying it out and then you're trying to improve it and then you keep sort of developing it. Yeah, keep going.
exactly.
All right.
Exactly. Don't try to boil the ocean at one time.
Right. Right.
Just take a little bit at a time. It helps you get quick ROI. If you can get a custom GPT in just a couple of hours that at least gets 95 or 80% of the way there, then that helps a lot. The second best practice I recommend is that treat your prompts, any of your workflows, anything that you develop, treat them like products. They're part of an overall system. So what does that mean? I joke with people now. I said your prompt that you use with ChatGPT or with Gemini is now the source code of the future. This is now how software applications are being built now, at least in prototype mode with Lovable and Cursor out there. That prompt becomes your new source code, or at least a new form of source code. So as you put things in production, you need to make sure that's versioned, that you know what prompt was used to produce that outcome, just in case you need to go back and trace it. You need,
So what,
go ahead.
Anthony, what do you do? Do you make a copy of it, put it over like in a Word doc somewhere and say what version it is and that sort of thing? What are you doing?
So for me, when it comes to my chats, I typically use something like Google Docs or Word doc that has versioning built in. So I can go through and edit, copy, put it in the chat, see what all the results are, go back, make some changes, save it again because it has versioning built in. When I
Mhm.
get to more of an agent, I'm now thinking more of as a developer. So then I'm using things like Git and other things like that that are more developer centric. But you can use products like, just
Okay.
Word or Google Sheets or Google Docs rather to have versioning built in.
Okay, cool. All right. So, so any questions yet?
I
Just
have
want
a quick
to,
question.
yeah, Julian?
Yeah, so I get saving the prompt. Do you also save like its understanding or response to your prompt as well, or it's just the prompt itself enough?
Well, it depends on what I'm looking to do. Most of the time, the output of the prompt I use in input in some other process. It's not just, hey, I want to take this and this is great for my learning. Some things are that way, but most of the time I take that data or that result and I put it someplace else. And so that becomes input into that next system or whatever it is I'm doing there. And that I may want to then version that then. But as in terms of the minimum, I version the actual prompt. And then depending on what I'm doing with the results, I may version that too. And
So
then
it might go into like a database, or it might go, or you might make a copy of it and say, and this is the result version of this version, and put it into your Word doc even.
exactly. I'll give you a prime
Okay.
example just really quickly. What I do when it comes to writing content, I'll draft content. I have a GPT that I've gotten to kind of do my editing to make sure it has the right tone. Definitely check for spelling and grammar because that's not my strong point. So I have that as my editor to help me check. And so I literally take here's the version of the prompt, here's what I provided it, and here's what comes out. That now gets all saved in a document. And
Okay.
so I go over and over with that. Here's the prompt, here's the input, here's the
Okay.
result until I get something that I like.
Okay. All right. So that's part of it. Now let's go ahead and dig into what we're doing here today. So this is the training part of and where you're just creating the custom GPT,
Yep,
right? That's what we're walking through here. And it has these 5 steps: define, teach, train, validate, and operationalize. And then the minimum tools that you have here then is you have your call recorder, your LLM, and you're working in it, like in your case, you were working in ChatGPT,
yep,
coming up with a custom GPT, right?
absolutely.
Okay.
Now, I do want to
So,
stress one thing there, two things,
mhm,
which is you need to make sure since you're dealing with customer data, you have either a business or enterprise relationship with
sure.
whatever LLM you're using. You want to have as many protections as you can to make sure your customer data is secure. So you
Right.
definitely want to do this with that level of license with your provider. But that also typically gives you more compute power, if you would, where you can do more complex things. If you're sending a video to an LLM, that's fairly complex. So you want to make sure you have that upper limits or whatever you can afford there in terms of how much bandwidth you can use for with your LLM.
Great. Yeah, that's a really good point to bring up. Okay, so for define, oh, I'm sorry. When I downloaded this, I didn't check. So we have this word here in the middle, but so
Not a problem.
design the structure and outcomes of your call type. So then are you literally sort of drawing out what your workflow is, or you know,
My view or how I do this, I make sure, and this is what I did with the customer, I made them document what's the agenda, what's the outcome of the call. Because if they can't define what good is, there's no way I can get a AI to tell it, what's good. At least not in what I was willing to do in the time frame that we agreed to. So I put that requirement on them. Define what good looks like for this call type. And the thing with me, the way I look at it is that you should design your calls just like you design your product. There's a certain feel for the product, there's a certain way the product works. All of your calls should be designed likewise, not necessarily using the same framework, but there should be the same sort of deliberate design or architecture to the call. What's the agenda? What are the typical slides? What's the outcome? What's the tone? So you want to make sure you can define what good looks like for that call type. And it's specific that you need to do it by call types because trying to get one GPT to understand all your different calls is going to be challenging. It's one of these things, if you optimize for everything, you optimize for nothing. So you need to make sure you understand what call
like
types you have, and
like a
then what
kickoff
does
call, or if you're
onboarding call, kickoff call, maybe a discovery call, depending on your model, could be a retention, could be a win back
okay.
call, whatever you have. You need to have them specific to your call type.
Okay. All right. Good. And then we shared the link for this prompt, but it's also linked in the slides wherever you see sort of prompt message, that's the link to this full prompt here. What are some of the key things that you want to mention about the prompt?
So in the prompt itself, you want to make sure you can tell the LLM what's its role, what's its task, what are you asking it to do. So if you're just looking for it to score, great, let it know that. If you want score plus some additional coaching feedback, you have to let it know that up front. The second thing you want to make sure you include what's the context of the call? When does the call happen? What's the customer likely feeling at this time? Just give it as much context as possible. And then what's the expected output? Expected input, I'm sorry. What are you providing it? A transcript? Or are you providing it the video? Or are you doing both? Or are you providing additional data from the CRM? Just let it know what type of data it'll have access to. And then lastly, if you want it to score, which is the whole point of this particular model, tell it how to score. How many points to give to each section of the call? If you have a certain tone and feel you want, how to score that? Is that worth 10 points? Is that worth 15 points? You have to tell it how to score it.
Awesome. Okay. So then the training. This is where you're still doing sort of manual, you're still just working with the custom GPT, and you want to take a look at what some of these sample calls look like and what sort of scoring. So this sounds like it's actually takes a little bit of time. Like you might need to listen to the call, have some idea of how you would score it, and then compare it against what the LLM is doing.
This is exactly, you're spot on. This is when the magic happens, if you would. This is when you teach the actual GPT or GEM how to score. You've already gone through and you said, hey, here's the definition. I've given you the blueprint, but now let me fine tune this. Let me show you how I would have scored it. So it is a cycle where you have a certain sample of calls. These could be calls or should be calls that you've already reviewed or things that you're going to review yourself. You have now the GPT, or in this case, the LLM, just go through and score it. Then you compare it. Here's how you scored it, or here's how you analyzed it. Here's what you missed. Here's what you got right. Here's what you got wrong. And you have that conversation back and forth with your LLM and have it tweak itself. Have it kind of, oh, okay, now I understand what you mean by, have an open feel to the call. Now I get it. Or now I understand how you want the call to open. You want to
Okay.
make sure you can fine tune it.
So when you say have it tweak itself, so then you say I would have scored it like this,
And
I
here's
interpret it
why.
this way and here's why. And then you ask it, how should we modify the custom GPT instructions so that we can get this type of output? And then you get the information from the LLM on what it suggests. Is that how you would get to that corrected version of the GPT?
That's absolutely one way. What I typically do,
Uh-huh.
I go through and I just have the conversation with it.
Yeah.
And after I get to the point where I'm happy, then I tell, now that we've had this conversation, we've
Okay.
gone through all these calls. Now, from all of that, give me the instructions rather, of how I should update the message, the system message. So I go
Okay.
through and I have that conversation, go over
Right.
several calls. And then when
Okay.
I'm happy with the output, I then say, now tell me, how do I build in or update the system message based upon this conversation?
Okay, so you go through a few different calls and you get to a point where then you feel like it understands and you're in the same place. And then you do the update. Okay, so given what the GPT instructions. Now, is everybody here, are you familiar with setting up the GPT instructions and how you set that up in ChatGPT? Has anybody ever done that before? Okay, I'm seeing some nodding some heads. Good. If you're not familiar with it, you can literally ask ChatGPT or Claude, how do I build this? And it will walk you through the steps of it. So, okay.
That's
So,
the fun part.
all right. So then you've gone through the coaching. Now you're going to validate it. So now that you've done your updated version of your custom GPT instructions, then you're going to go ahead and try it on a few new calls. And
These are
now, does
calls
this require that you've graded those calls as well?
you will grade them in the process, but these are now new calls, ones that you haven't seen
Right.
before, not
Uh-huh.
included in the sample. So
Okay.
the part of this process is that you will also grade them, but this is not to provide feedback directly to the GPT. At this point, you just want to validate on new calls that it's still working at the level that you expect.
Okay. And if it's not, then you'd have to go back and
Go
make
back to the
so you
training.
go back to the step before.
Yeah.
Okay. And so then now this is how we take it and start to put it into what this are we at the point of getting it into automation yet? Or is
Not
this
in automation. The first thing I
okay?
would do if I'm working through this to make sure that it's really working, I would
Uh-huh.
take the custom GPT and just share it with my team
Okay.
and say, hey, here's something we have now. This is something you can start using. Here's how you use it. Here's how you can take your recordings of your videos and transcripts. You can just put this in. It'll give you some coaching. That way
Mm-hmm.
your team gets familiar with it. Your team can tell you whether or not it agrees or not agree. You get that feedback. And then that will set you up for the next stage, which is now less automated. But this is another way of getting your team some value without investing too much.
Okay, so now your team starts to use it, starts to feel like, okay, this is actually useful, and then you decide we're going to agentify it,
Yeah.
right? Now we're going to put this into automation. Is everybody still with us? Okay, seeing nodded heads and some thumbs
Good.
up. Thank you. Appreciate you, Norma. Okay, so this is this is kind of messy. How should I look at this? Walk me through it,
So
Anthony.
So the key to automating this is to try to minimize the number of calls or the number of API calls or touch points you have to make. And so you can imagine all the meetings you can have with your customers, trying to correlate those meetings to what's the Zoom ID and all of those things. So one of the things I've done when I did for this customer is I integrated Zoom with HubSpot. We were using HubSpot for this particular customer. That means that from HubSpot, I'm already getting all the Zoom meeting IDs when I get the meeting. So that's one less place I have to go look to get this information. So now I can just talk. And step one is let me talk to HubSpot through its API. And that's what that HTTP request is. I'm making a request to the HubSpot API. Say, give me all the company meetings. For all of my customers, give me all the meetings that you have. But because that API is going to give me back all the meetings, I need to figure out which meetings are new that I haven't scored yet. and which ones I have already seen. And so this is why I have a Postgres database. You can use whatever database you have to just keep track of which meetings have you already scored. Okay. So that's number two. I want to figure out from the data I have stored of which meetings I've already scored and the data I'm getting back from HubSpot, give me all the new meeting IDs. That's all step two is. I want to use those two data to figure out what's new. With those new meeting IDs, I can then go out to Zoom and say, now give me the transcripts and the videos for these new meetings. Once I have the transcripts and videos, I can then pass them over to the custom scoring agent. Now, this is specific to N8N and how and N8N is another kind of AI orchestration workflow platform, but it has a specific role that it calls an agent. And it's in line somewhat with what we discussed up front, but that custom agent within N8N can use the custom GPT that you've written, or to Jan's point earlier, you can just ask GPT, that custom one that you've built, give me the updated system message that I can then pass to an agent. So you can do it either way, but now your agent has all that scoring logic, all that scoring training that you've given it, so it can automate the scoring of the new videos. Then you take that output from that and you store it into a database so you now know this is what I've actually scored. And to the
And
point that was asked earlier, I typically, at least in the model I have that's in production right now, I put into the database the version of the prompt that was used to score that particular call. Excuse me. So not only do I have the scoring itself and whatever coaching that comes out of it, but I also have here's the actual prompt that we use to do that scoring. So at any point, if I need to go back and rescore, I can use a new prompt and I can look at the differences. Okay, but with this new prompt, this is how we would have scored this.
And then that can also output then to an email and that goes to or
Goes,
whatever output you want to do that goes to the CSM so they can see how their call went and they can get that coaching information. You can also output it so that then the manager can look at how each individual is doing over time or how the team
yep.
is doing on certain types of calls, things like that, right? So then you can sort of slice and dice that data in different ways, depending upon how you set it up to look at it. You can also then look at what some of the topics and issues are that are coming up across all of your accounts or for a particular account over time, or if there's a particular person, that is a detractor or who is a champion within that account or across all your champions or whatever, right? Like all of a sudden, now that you have this data, or you're doing this call scoring, you're looking at all of this data, then you can start to slice and dice the data in different ways. Is that correct, essentially, Anthony?
You're spot on. Where we are with this customer, we're putting all of the data in Postgres. And the first step is for their managers, their frontline managers, to have access to that data to do that slicing. So now it informs them when they get on their one-on-ones with the CSMs, they can then share, hey, here's what you have, here's what's going on. And this is what what we may need to work on. The next step is now, once they're comfortable with that, can we have that just automatically send the data to the CSMs? So now they have that direct access to it instantly. But your other point is spot on. This is now more data you can use. You can now aggregate this by customer, by role of the contact at the customer. Is this my challenger? Is this my champion? Who is this that I'm dealing with? And what am I seeing across these calls with these individuals? This is where you can capture your customer intent. What's going on? Are they really looking at another product? Are we hearing any signals here that there may be a retention issue going on? or is this a
Right.
expansion opportunity? What
And
I have proposed for this customer is that let's keep this particular agent focused on scoring the CSM and the call, and let's add another agent that will be fine-tuned to get that customer intelligence. And so now you have those two working together to give you a more complete picture of what's going on.
okay, so somebody was asking too, and we'll get to you in just a second, Fran, a couple questions here. So someone was asking, um, what is involved in this tech stack. And what we have here in this example is we have HubSpot, Zoom, Postgres, which is basically like a database, right? In its basic form. And then we have N8N, right?
That's
Those,
it. And OpenAI or ChatGPT. That's the
right.
entire
And
stack.
then, right. And wherever you built the custom GPT, or if you were going to build that in N8N and have it call out to one of those. But so you, yeah, an LLM is part of that. So that's basically, so if you're using something other than Zoom, then you would connect it with that. If you're using something different than HubSpot, then you would connect it with that, right? And so these connectors in here, where he's been specific about how he built this version, where he said he did it via HTTP request. It's basically when you're looking in sort of like, how do I connect these things? How do I send this information? It will, you can go and get that information from each of these tools, right? Because each tool is going to have some way in which it connects, right? So it can be different depending upon your tech stack. And Matt Jandorf, you were asking about what is the time investment for that initial LLM where he was building the custom GPT. That was 1 week, right? So yes,
Yeah.
it does take time to evaluate what does good look like. But if you don't evaluate what good looks like, then you're not really guiding the LLM to give you an output that's useful. Right? So you do want to, and it's always helpful to know what good looks like and define what that is for your team anyway, right? So while it does take that investment in time initially, I think that it's worth it both for your individual team members, your team overall, and for building this out. Are you convinced yet of that, Matt? You still have some questions on it.
And I would say that's 1 week of me and one of their leaders working together, not the entire team.
Yeah.
So if we look at how that scales very well. That took a week of me and someone else just who I was a technician, so to speak, and I
Yeah.
had the strategy, but they knew their customers. They know their calls. I didn't know that. So I needed to have their input so that we can go through and look at them. They did the scoring. When we went through the training, they had to score it. I didn't score it because they know
Right.
what their standards are. I just work with them. Now let's feed that back into the LLM and let's tweak it. That was my whole
Okay.
role in
Matt,
this.
Matt, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, yeah, this is something that's top of mind for me because the reality of our situation is we don't have, tech people that are helping us with these things. We're all having to build it ourselves and learn at the same time. So trying to think of like, if it's gonna take a week of my time to do something, is that like, at what point is it good enough? Especially with the training aspect, because you could probably iterate on that, 1,000 times if you really wanted to. So just trying to think through that and I'm constantly trying to weigh out like how much time does it take versus how much time is it going to save in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where you get to can decide. You can decide how much help you want the actual LLM to do, how much lift you want it to do. If you want to get it to the point where it's automated and just doing all of that, you may have to spend more effort. But if you want it to be 60% accurate versus 90%, that's your choice. You get to decide how deep do you take that? How you want PhD level or just a bachelor's degree? Or do you just want it with a GED? You get to decide how far you want to take the training.
Fran, what was your
Fair
question?
enough.
Been patient.
Yeah, just a silly question, but I see that you have HubSpot here. I mean, I'm a Salesforce girl, so
Mhm.
any CRM
any CRM, you would just need to understand what the API calls are there. But I know because in my previous company, we use Salesforce and I've used Salesforce most of my life. You can do the same thing in Salesforce. Salesforce has API calls you can make to get some of the same data.
So,
Another thing.
right,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, just a quick follow-up. So when you're talking about APIs, is that something that me as a single user can actually, I mean, obviously I don't have Salesforce at home. So this is only if you're working, can this be done?
Um, no, I mean, if for example, I had access to I have personally for my own business, I have access to HubSpot. I decided to pay for HubSpot because it's a lot cheaper for me than Salesforce, at least where I am right now. So I could do this with Salesforce if I wanted to pay the money for HubSpot or Salesforce or something else. I can do this. You just need to have a license to that particular platform where you can go and get this data because it's really about how do you get the data about the customer and the meeting, and that's what the CRM is there for. So you can do this without being employed. You just may have to establish your own relationship with the CRM.
Or like I use Fathom.
Yep.
There's a free version of Fathom. You can connect that up with Zapier,
Yep.
right? And depending upon how involved your connection to Zapier is, you may or may not need to pay for the Zap, and then you can kind of go from there, right?
Absolutely. And
So
there's
it's
some
more
open source.
about just looking at what your tech stack is. The other thing that Nathan Spear put in the chat, and I think is really great advice, is the expansion sale is a book where they've literally tested the 4 primary conversations.
Yep.
I love the one, and we've done sessions in CxXchange Success Hour about the expansion sale. So you can look those up too. And that was something where you can use those questions like, let's see, renewal, expansion, price increase, or the apology. My favorite is the apology, right? Because sometimes you have to do real doozies of an apology, right? And they've even gone through and tested that. And those have then not only the primary questions you would want to ask, but also the order in which you would want to go through in terms of framing those conversations successfully. And we even had a CS leader in those sessions talk through how he used those, especially when they were doing price increases. And
Yeah.
they incorporated those questions into, I think they were using Avoma, but you can use it, in a variety of different, whether you're using Gong or whatever, and you can literally have it look for those questions. He also then used it for his onboarding process. There were 10 different steps over the course of the onboarding that he was looking at. He had his CSMs change those into yes, no questions that then he could pick up on. And then he was able to look at. From that, he identified an area that was always a no across the board for all the CSMs. When he dug into that, he looked at what was creating the problems with that. He then used it to change where and how he introduced those steps in the onboarding process. Not only did he turn those all into yeses and greens, he also was able to decrease the onboarding time by 40%. So when you take a look at your processes and your calls and how you're using it, whether to coach and score or to understand your processes, there's a lot you can learn from it if you start to think about your AI recorder as more than just a depository for action items in an email to your customer later. Is that
Spot on. Spot on. I would have, instead of trying to do all that, as we said earlier, in one call, I would have, hey, listen, is this a potential expansion call? And have it fine tuned to listen for those conversations. If you have an idea up front, hey, is this a price increase conversation or are we dealing with any sort of apology? Maybe those are different call types depending on how complex your model is or your journey is. But then fine tune the model to pick up on those elements. And then it could take action potentially. You can have store that in a database and then have another agent go through and take action. Hey, we flagged this one, or we changed the health score of this because we heard this in a call. I mean, when you can string these things along where they're working with each other, it really becomes powerful. I saw there's a question earlier. Do they really work together? In N8N, they do. And what I have built as a prototype for this customer of mine, I have two agents. One that's fine-tuned on getting customer intelligence, buyer intent in particular, and another one that's doing the call scoring. And the way I've sequenced those in N8N is that the intelligence one picks up intelligence from the call that's then fed back to the database. And so that can go to the database and back into the CRM when we build it for real for the customer. But it also sends that intelligence into the agent that's scoring. So it has more context of what happened in the call, and that will impact how it scores. So you can actually pass that data around to help you make other agents more intelligent, so to speak, in their work.
All right, so we went way beyond time walking through all of this, but why don't we instead then kind of go for some questions with folks here. Are you using AI tools, and and what kinds of problems might you want to solve for? Is there some way in which you might apply this process that we've been talking through today? Does anybody want to kind of share? Yeah, Fran?
I'm just thinking, I've been interviewing for a lot of roles where it's a more scale situation. And so I'm thinking through, there may be conversations, is there a way even to do some like survey things that you could then plug into this and extrapolate, the questions may not seem as direct, but you could extrapolate out some of that same information around intent and things like that.
You very well could. I mean, if you can train if you have certain questions that you're going to ask in an indirect way, you can train the AI, the GPT, the model, whatever you're using there, to detect those either in the transcript or in the audio or video, and then capture the customer's reaction. That is something you absolutely can train a model on. Now, you have to train both the model and the person doing the meeting so that the two are on the same page.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts or questions as we're finishing up here?
I have a question. It's Kathy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see a follow-up session where you could take us through some of the exact wording of the prompts as you build an agent, or like scoring the calls, the kind of things you tell it to do, and how like detailed you need to get, and how much
Oh,
thinking is
We do have the link. We do have the link in the slides to the prompt. So
okay.
yeah, so if you're looking at it in the resources, there's a number of different resources here, but then also where you see here the prompt message, and that was also part of one of the links in the chat, where it takes you specifically through each section.
Oh, I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. And there's also a number of different things I've seen out there on LinkedIn lately too. And maybe I'll share some of those links to the LinkedIn posts where they're talking about how to structure your prompt in order to get more from it. And it really has, the more context you provide, then the more you're going to get from those instructions, from the output. when you're working with the LLM.
Context matters. That's where you really get the power out of AI, giving it as much context as possible.
Mhm. Right. And sort of structuring it and then thinking about what, input and output that you're looking for. And
Yep.
if you give that information, then you're likely going to get closer to what you're looking for. It does require some thought up front. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll start off in one chat where I'll just be riffing and exploring what exactly do I want. I'll put it into and create a prompt there, and then I'll move over into a new chat, put the prompt in, and then see about, what I actually want. Because you don't always know what you want up front, but you can explore that in a separate prompt and have the LLM help you come up with it.
That's the wonderful thing about this. And when I'm stuck or challenged in writing a prompt, I'll actually ask ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever I'm using, saying, hey, I need a prompt to do X. And I'll give it the context. Here's my thought. Here's maybe the structure I'm starting with. Help me write something that accomplishes what I need to accomplish. So it can actually help you write the prompt itself,
Right.
which is the fun part.
I have a
You
quick
guys can tell I enjoy this stuff.
Hey, Julian, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for you, Anthony. I haven't gone through the steps piece by piece yet on the slides, but would you say there are any steps that are most important or more important to put emphasis on? And then are there any particular tools in the resource that you would say top three you should prioritize these?
I didn't hear that last part, but in terms of the steps that I think are most important, before you can begin any of this, you have to know what good looks like. You have to be able to define good. If you can't define it, you cannot teach the AI about it. And I sound like my mother now, the AI. You can't teach ChatGPT, Gemini, or whatever else that you may be using what good looks like. Now, you can use ChatGPT and the other LLMs to help determine what good looks like. You can use that interactively, but that's a different exercise. But you have to be able to define what good looks like. You have to go through that exercise, and that's often the hardest part of it. It's just being able to agree what does the actual structure of this call look like, and what does good sound like. That's hard. That's not as easy as people may think. Is what I found.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And that second question was, I'm looking at the resources. It's saying like tools you should use, et cetera. Are there any tools that you would say are like top three or the ones that are golden?
I think just start out with whatever LLM you're using. If you're using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever you may be using, start there. This is what I recommended for my client. If you're not yet ready to go in the deep end with a huge investment in time or money, even though this didn't cost much for my customer to keep running an N8N, didn't cost them much at all. But start with just the LLM. Build this and have it work on your calls, or a few calls where it's manual. Like I shared there, the first step I would do after I built the custom GPT is just share that to the rest of my team. Hey, I built this, it's working. Let me share it. You can use it too to get some one-on-one coaching. And then if that works, then I would make that further investment to think about automating it, or, getting it where it's just running as a system on its own. But I would just start with the LLM you're already using.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too that Nathan Spear was also asking about, the tool stack or the tech stack, and again, I think you want to start with what is already be in use.
Yeah.
And so, and that goes for you, even if you're just trying to try something at home, right? What are you using Google Suite? Then maybe you want to try using a gem. Are
Yep.
you using ChatGPT? Then start trying to work with a custom GPT. If you're mostly in Claude, then try and build some things in Claude, there. But there's ways to use what you're already using and exploring that. And then from there, just thinking about, what do you want to do? right? And start, defining that. And again, if you're not sure at first, have a conversation, with your LLM about it and say, okay, now how might I structure this? How do I score this? Come up with, have it give you some suggestions. You don't
Yep.
have to have all the answers at the beginning. And so if you're scared of looking at a blank page, you don't need to. Just start having a conversation with the LLM and you can get past that blank page. All right, we are at the hour. If there's any other burning questions, happy to answer it. Otherwise, I really
Just out of
appreciate.
curiosity,
Yeah.
this has been great. Thanks, Anthony and Jen. Quick question on whether this particular customer or other customers, whether they've evaluated tools like Gone or Chorus, and do you know if they have the same capability of like training on specifically that, or it's, specifically like tailoring to your, call scripts and stuff like that? Or, they just went straight in for your solution because it was, I suppose, less of an investment for them, both time and financially.
So I've had Gong before. I love Gong, but one of the challenges I had is just getting Gong to recognize that I have more than one call, and the agenda and the objections in each call may be different. And so I know some of this can be done by Gong, but I think you may run into some limitations if you want to do very call specific or call type specifics.
Yeah.
This particular customer was looking at other tools, but they also were looking at some of the others, the overall spend. These other tools they weren't certain of. There's like, well, we're already using ChatGPT. Is there something we can do with ChatGPT to at least get our fingers, if you would, wet in this?
Yeah.
They may actually move to some other tools. There's some tools that are out there today that can give you in-call coaching. And that may be where they go in the long term. But that's just why I mapped out a roadmap for them and say, this is where we can go with your ChatGPT if you would like it. If you're liking what you're getting here, here's a roadmap. But I absolutely understand they may pivot off of that to go buy a solution versus build a solution.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where, like in a past session, when we were talking about Avoma, where you can have different types of calls and you can set in like what those questions are. That may not be the only tool where you can do something like that. And it could be that you don't have a tool that does that, and yet you still want to do some sort of scoring. This gives you a way to do scoring, even if you aren't using a tool that does scoring and coaching.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And really, what I really hope is that this gets sort of the imagination going and thinking about what is the problem that I need to solve for, right? It may or may not be specifically call scoring and coaching, but what is it? And and how can you explore that? And hopefully, this will empower you to give something a try and to think about how you can automate things as well. So thank you, everyone, for joining and for sticking around a few extra minutes. Really appreciate you all.
This has been fun.
Anthony.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.